This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Forging Table. The mission of Undaunted.Life is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. At the Forging Table, you'll see a group of regular guys forging spiritual resilience by digging into God's Word, and we're welcoming all of you to come along on that journey with us. That's Howard, that's Ryan, that's Zach. Guys, we're digging into Genesis 19 today. So there's been a lot of kind of run-up to the things that we see in Genesis 19, and there's quite a bit to discuss with it. So we're going to launch right in. Howard, if you would get us read on verses 1 through 11. And did we convince you in the break to switch to ESV because you kept losing us in the NIV?
I believe
I did. You think we can have him?
I thought you were going to kill him.
I did go to ESV.
Ooh, yeah, let's read it in the message so we can know not what the scripture says.
It won't say anything about homosexuality. That's
we can know that.
I didn't download the message, so sorry.
Oh, shoot.
That's a good thing.
All right. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he arose to meet them and bowed himself to the face to the earth and said, "My Lord, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way." He said, "No, we will spend the night in the town square." But he pressed them strongly. So they turned aside to him and they entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people of the last to the last man surrounded the house. And they called to Lot, "Where are the men that came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them." Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have two daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under my shelter, the shelter of my roof." But they said, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against the man, Lot, and drew near to break the door down. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with him, and shut the door. And they struck them with blindness, and the men were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping for the door.
So there's a lot in this first section, and I got to be really honest. I read through some commentaries, and I feel like I got more confused with some of the things that were happening during this commentary. One thing that I was not confused by, which was what exactly were these men wanting when they were at the door? Because as we were talking about during the break, there are people who are like, "Well, I don't think they're talking about homosexuality. I don't think they're talking about sodomy."
It's a nuanced approach.
Yeah, it's very nuanced. Yeah, that's every time someone uses the word nuance, that's how I assume they're saying it. It's very nuanced. It's just a lot of gray. You know, why are you laughing? I don't understand. So yeah, that's not very confusing here in all this. But there's one thing here that is something I haven't seen a lot of people comment on. And so maybe I'm reading into it a little bit more, thinking about it too much. But originally, Lot was going to move his tent near Sodom, but he was never actually going to be a part of the city. Okay, that he was going to be near the city, but not in the city. But we can see from verse 3 that he has a house in the city now. Okay, so they did not go to his place, which was on the outskirts in the suburbs of Sodom, right? He's in Sodom proper. And so part of this we've seen is the closer you get to an urban city center, the more lawless it gets, the less Christian it gets, the more issues you have with crime, single motherhood, abortion, fatherlessness, basically things get worse. Yeah. But then the further you get away from those centers, right, which are politically blue, all of them, the more you get towards, whether it's real or not, but you get more towards a particular type of faith. You're more conservative in your political leanings. And so that was interesting to me because this is almost like and again, I'm trying not to read stuff into the text, but it's like Lot seems to have been romanced from outside the city into inside the city, and it kind of become one with the city that we see going back to Genesis 13. This is a depraved place full of wicked people. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the thing that I saw and read in several of the commentaries that Lot's life was a steady progression of compromise, right? On the outside of the city, he kind of is romancing about the goodness of, he moves a little bit closer, and then he moves a little bit. Now he's in the city, and from some things I read, he was a leader in the city. That's why he was at the city gates. And so, he's fully in now.
I wonder if he also went into the city for safety, and the fact that when he was kidnapped by the other kings, his tent was more than likely on the outside of the city. And so now he's like, all right, well, I'm going to go back to Sodom, but I'm going to be more safer within the walls of Sodom.
It said somewhere where I read that if you have a place like he does inside of the city, it probably indicates that you may have a role or a position within the city also. Yeah. So it's more than just being around. You're part of the system.
Yeah. Well, there's a good chance that his wife was from Sodom too.
Yeah, I didn't want to read too far into that, but I did think it was interesting because I feel like with a lot of people that we run into, like most of us, I think at different points we've all lived in urban centers. I mean, I used to live in, Soho in New York City, and so you're like right there in the middle of everything. But I feel like the more we kind of get into our families, we're all thinking about how can we get, further out of town? Like, how can we have more chickens? Like, how can we kind of homestead a little bit? And, I've heard a lot of people before that are talking about somebody will buy a huge tract of land and then they will sell, they'll keep 10 acres, but then they sell 5 acres to this friend and 5 acres to that friend. And so they almost create a little bit of a compound for themselves. Now, notice how I didn't say cult. Notice how I did not say cult, kibbutz? But well, what'd you say? Or kibbutz? Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what a kibbutz is that like this is a communal area. There's a community garden. There's a lot of different things. Again, I had the guy on that created the show Homestead, and that's kind of like what those people are doing. It's all people that are on a particular tract of land that are all, kind of helping and surviving. Some people do that now in a prepper context to where they're like, okay, this is where we can lock down all the gates, and here's all the guys that are going to be on the wall. But it's almost like when people are doing that, it's not. These are typically Christians as well. These are typically people that are wanting to protect their families from the predations of a, basically an inner city lifestyle. And I don't want to like denigrate anybody that lives in a city center. You live where you live and you can act how you want to act regardless of what you're around. But that was just something that stuck out to me with this early part is that Lot was not supposed to be in the city and now he's there for a particular reason, whether he has an official role in the government and goings on of the city, but he seems to have kind of like acquiesced to the attitude of this wicked and depraved city.
I think it'd be different if he came in and really was, fervent in his passion to try to change that city. But nothing in the text shows anywhere of he was that type of person, right? Like, did he come in and try to change the culture and the way? No, he just became a part of it.
Well, after he was kidnapped, he didn't go back to his uncle. He went back to the city.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to know about, what goes down in the town square in Sodom? Like he goes, the two angels are like, no, we're going to go sleep in the town square. And he's like, no, don't do it.
You don't go to the town square, bro.
Don't go to town square, bro.
It's crazy.
You come sleep at my house. I'll make you dinner and clean your feet. Like, you don't want to go to the town square. So it's like Central Park at night.
Oh, dude. Yeah. It's bad news. Now I will tell you obviously the most confusing part of this, and again, I'm the only one at this table without a daughter, but because out of an extreme display of hospitality, he's like, no, don't rape my male guests, but I have some virgin daughters that you might be interested in. Would you like them?
You kind of broke that nuanced approach with that one.
Yeah, I kind of just went straight with it, didn't I?
Yeah.
Again, some people have tried to say that they're not talking, that knowing these men is not talking about sodomizing these men, but like that is a complete
then
misread.
Why did he say they're virgins?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, hey, take my daughters.
None of that makes any sense at all. The amount of mental gymnastics that you have to do. But why would he offer up his daughters like that? Like, what was the point? Because yes, it proves the point to an extreme degree that, hey, I'm going to be hospitable towards, these sojourners. But my goodness, I mean, I just didn't see, commentary that really helped me.
Just another man abdicating his responsibility.
That's worse. It's way worse than that.
It's way worse, but it's just like, he thinks he's being hospitable. And we're going to see the correlation of what Sodom has done to not only Lot, but his daughters later on in this chapter. And so for them, he's like, well, I got to take care of these guys. Worst comes to worst, they can just take my daughters, for they have not known men. He's just abdicating his responsibility.
The commentary I was reading here says, again, Lot thought that through compromise, he might reach these men, but just the opposite happened. They had no respect for him. Where do we compromise our morals, or our standards? Right, like,
yeah, and I think that's where 2 Peter 2:7-8 comes in, where he calls him righteous. Peter calls him righteous Lot. He felt what he was doing was righteous, and it wasn't. So
yeah, that's the thing is when you compromise and you are, participating in worldliness, you lose your influence in many ways because you don't have that witness and that separation. And that's what it says here. Because of his worldliness, Lot had no spiritual influence either in the city or in his home. I think that's a big deal. One thing is, I don't want to just jump to it, but it struck me, they must have been extremely depraved if they were struck blind and then continued to grope for the door.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to want that in a way that I can't even fathom.
Yeah.
If I'm struck blind, I'm out. Whatever I'm doing, I'm sitting down and I'm walking away. You know what I mean?
They were there to grope, and they were groping something.
Mercy.
That's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's certainly what they wanted to do. Well, not if you have a modern description of what the word no means. But yeah, that is a level of depravity that these guys were thirsting big time for. Let's go ahead and keep this. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think it's kind of funny if you notice that when Lot offers his daughters, it's basically what Abraham did in Egypt. Mm-hmm. He offered his
up
wife,
Sarai
Sarai
my sister,
as to Pharaoh.
Save himself.
To save himself. And so Lot was offering up his daughters to save his guests and himself. Mm-hmm. So it's just like kind of, if you look at the parallel version of that, it's like, but that's the thing is that God still looks at Abraham of being righteous. And that's why, God still looks at Lot as being righteous in this moment, and the fact that these angels are still trying to get him out of Sodom before it's destroyed.
Yeah, and I guess contextually in those days, there was a different perception and paradigm when it came to women.
Yeah.
I was about to say the same thing. I mean, the level, because that's kind of the description that we see in Scripture. The fact that the first eyewitnesses of the risen Jesus were women, we don't see that as interesting in our modern way of viewing things. But like these were a lot of times, especially in that society, women were seen as less valuable than livestock in a lot of cases, right? And so they certainly would not have their opinions be admissible in court, or they wouldn't be believed in any type of manner. And so to around this time when this was happening, or to a reader in the first century or something like that, they would not have been aghast at this type of thing like we are. Like, oh, he did what? He offered up his virgin daughters so that he wouldn't have to like inconvenience his male sojourning guests. It's like, well, I mean, this is a really bad thing that we look at, being where we're at now, downstream, it seems so crazy. But at that time, again, it just goes back to the reasons why we can look at the Scripture as like, no, this is a description of actual reality. Wes Huff pointed this out. I think I made a reference to this on last week's episode, but when he was on Joe Rogan, you could tell Joe Rogan wanted the other gospels that are not part of canon to be real, like just because it's more interesting. The Gospel of Barnabas and the Gospel of Judas and the Gospel of Peter. But when you see in the Gospel of Peter, there's no mention of the female eyewitnesses. And so you can tell that somebody tried to clean it up. And part of the reason why we can look at the synoptic gospels and the females being the first ones that saw that is because that was an inconvenient fact that if you were manufacturing the story out of whole cloth, you would not have put that in there. That detail would not have been in there because it would not have helped your story in any way, shape, or form. Well, let's keep this going in Genesis 19. We're going to do verses 12 through 22. So Ryan, how about you hit that?
12 through 22.
Let's go.
All right. With me. I know you don't like dead air, so I'm going to continue to talk. Then there was...
You can sing like you did off in between episodes or whatever.
You want me to do the Jack Black?
No, don't do it.
All right. Then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city, bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, up, take your wife and your daughters, who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. But he lingered. So the men seized him and his wife's 2 daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as they brought them out, one said, escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away. And Lot said to them, oh no, my lords, behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, the city is near enough to flee to, and it's a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one, and my life will be saved? He said to him, behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar.
So I want to go back to verse 16, but he lingered.
Yeah.
So the big question here is why? Why did he linger? Was he sad that he might lose all of his stuff? Was he worried about the city itself? Was he worried about these particular people? We're left only to speculate because we don't get an exact description from Scripture why he lingered. So I just want to throw that out there and open that up for some discussion.
I think he just is going to miss the city. I mean, like Howard is saying, he just kept progressing more and more towards the city of Sodom. And so it's like, yeah, he's leaving behind memories, he's leaving behind possessions. And I don't know if he really realizes the wickedness of Sodom.
Okay. Maybe he's been so depraved, or he's been in the area for so long that he doesn't realize the depravity that's around him.
I think that I was reading through that, and it just, either one of the commentaries I read or just sitting there, thinking through the idea of that, when we think about when the Lord's coming back, is there anything about this world that we'll miss? Or do we just think, no, our eyes are forward, not back? And to me, that is what Lot's doing here. He's thinking back. His eye isn't on what the Lord has planned for him. He's more about, what am I going to miss from this city or that culture or whatever? And it's like, no, like, why should you have any desire or any reflection back on that? Our eyes should be forward. And
the whole way you described that, which I think is probably the way he'd be thinking about it, just revolved around the word I the whole time, And he was rescued, like you said before, and went straight back to Sodom. So he didn't learn from that. In this case, he's just been part of this system and wants to have it his way and not God's way. God literally had to drag him out.
Yeah. And I think the other thing could be his son-in-laws. They thought he was jesting.
I guess the angels.
Yeah. And the fact that his daughters were betrothed to be married. And so that kind of gave me an interesting look at what that looks like. And like when you're betrothed, it's like a year before you actually consummate the marriage. And so he already had sons who probably were already sodomites, son-in-laws who were sodomites that were supposed to marry his daughters. And he could have lingered to give them more time. Who knows? Trying to say, hey, like, this is going to happen. Like, look what's going down. So I don't know. There's many things that could have gone on in that.
Well, go ahead, Howard.
It's interesting how the angels ask him, have you anyone else here that you need to try to get out of the city? And it's like, no, I mean, besides his son-in-laws,
no one else.
Like, we talk about having a group of men that you do life with. It's like Sodom, he didn't have anybody in this city.
No, they're outside trying to rape him.
Yeah.
They're blind now, though. They're groping the ground.
They're raping everybody out here. The other thing about this, so funny thing, that's not funny, but you use the word sodomites. So where do we get the word sodomites? It's because of what the people in Sodom were like. So again, people that are trying to reread the text and say something that's not saying, you have to look at the context of what we're seeing. But also, I do wonder if it has something, Ryan, you kind of alluded to this a little bit, to where you don't understand how depraved the area you're in is until maybe an outsider comes in and sees it. Because I remember when I moved to New York City, I had a random job with Major League Baseball, and I knew I was going to be there temporarily, and so the speed of the city never bothered me. People would be like, "Oh, you come from slow place Oklahoma, it's going to be the speed that bothers you." It's like, bro, like these people barely talk fast as I do. Like the speed is not what worried me. It was that you would run into a Christian in a city of, I'm in a borough that has almost as many people as the state of Oklahoma, right? And so you would run into a Christian, and it would be like, oh, I found the other one. Like that's what it felt like, because the entire city revolved around, and this was, 2012, the entire city revolved around money, success, sex, partying. And the people I was working with, they leaned into basically all of that, right? These are people that went out every single night, because we worked every single day for 9 months, right? That was just part of the job we were doing. And they would go out, like we would get done sometimes at 1 or 2 in the morning, and we knew we had to be back by 9 a.m. and these people would go out. Because that was the currency. It was going out, live it up, what is it, feast for tomorrow we die, or whatever the thing is. Like that's what these people were doing. And I don't know if they could see it. I don't know if a lot of these people could see it, because they were like, this is just my sandbox and I'm going to play in it. But for me, I'm coming in more sober-minded, like literally and figuratively. And it's like, man, y'all don't understand how depraved this place is. Yeah. Like, and it's just because they couldn't see it, because they were steeped in it. They were marinated in it for so long that you wonder if you could take someone out of that place for a while and then put them back in. It's like, wait, this city does stink. Yeah. There are rats everywhere. Man, the governance of this place is really terrible. I just got used to the filth, right? Yeah. It's the same thing when you see people that are only not squatters, but people, people that have like 1 million of everything in their house. It's all hoarders. When you see these episodes, it's absolutely haunting. These people are surrounded by filth and excrement and just all this kind of stuff, but they just get used to it. Yeah. They don't smell the smell anymore, right? They don't understand that I'm surrounded by clutter and filth. It's just where they are. You wonder, man, if I could just pluck this person out for a week and then put them back in, they'll actually be able to see what it looks like. Yeah. Other thoughts on this before God blows off some fireworks? Howard?
Nope, nothing I can think of on there.
Okay, Howard. Well,
hold on. No, I did have one more.
Okay, let's go.
I think it's in one of Vodi Bachum's book. It says, "You've heard it said, as the family goes, so goes the nation. But it can be said, as the father goes, so goes the family." And so, if you look at Lot's life here, that's the exact truth. I mean, look what happens next. So.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what he says when he's like, "You send your kids to Caesar, don't be surprised they come back Romans." You know, and it's like you send your family to Sodom, don't be surprised if they come back Sodomites.
It's kind of like sending your kids to Disneyland, right? You know, you send them to Disneyland or Disney World, they hang out with the bearded lady, right? Kind of like that. Ryan. Is it like that?
There was no bearded lady.
No, because you had to cover your kids' eyes while they're walking past the bearded princess.
Hold on.
Keep giving them money though. That's great.
I just went to Disney and we got back last week. And while we were there, we were in Epcot. And so in several of the areas within Epcot, they were telling the Christmas story. Okay. And several of these people talking mentioned the birth of Christ.
Oh, wow.
So I was very...
And what he didn't tell you about that part of the story is as soon as Disney found out about it, they fired them all. They fired them all because they're only allowed to employ sodomites.
The gospel was spoken at Epcot more than it is some churches in Oklahoma.
Which is also, do you want to name them?
I'm not going to name them. That's not my place.
But I was very shocked by that. Several of the
Maybe they'll work that into a storyline for a future Pixar thing or something like that. Maybe they'll work in, or they'll just go right back to the trans kids thing. But by all means, let's just keep giving money to people that hate us. That's great, guys. Let's get into, speaking of God destroying Sodomites, let's go right in to God doing that exact thing. Whoever wants to read 23 through 29.
The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley, and he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow. When he came, he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived.
So the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, one of the... one of the most known things of the Old Testament, things that happened. So when it says sulfur and fire, some people are saying that, no, this rained down. This was like a supernatural thing that God sent from the sky. Some people think, no, this was a volcanic eruption. And so it was just a description. Yeah, some people think volcanic eruption with an earthquake. Some might even say it was a Sharknado. We don't know. We don't know exactly what happened. We weren't there. We don't have video. But have you guys seen any people that are kind of like trying to surmise where that happened? There are certain people that are over in like Turkey and stuff like that. And they're like, no, this is where it happened.
South of the Dead Sea. It's Dead Sea south on the western side. Or eastern side.
Eastern side, yeah.
No, western side.
I saw Eastern.
You saw Eastern?
Eastern because we
got supercomputers in front of us.
They went in and they took the calculations because somewhere it says it's south. Well, the south in that context is like east southeast, right? Mm-hmm. And so where they went over and found that, they excavated and found where all of this happened, where they think this happened, the population size, the date ranging of that fits with all of those time periods. I think it's the Second Bronze Age or whatever. Well, in some of the excavations, they actually found sodium balls that would have lined up exactly with what would have happened. So thought it was very interesting when they pulled up some of those and showed them unearthing these little white.
Yeah.
So.
And I think it's interesting.
Sulfur, sorry.
Yeah, we talk about this with, we've talked about this some other things. If the Bible were just a collection of fables that were all kind of mushed together because Constantine needed to support his decision to become a Christian or whatever, every time we would have an archaeological find,
Yeah.
Like we would expect it to go against the narrative of Scripture, but we see the exact opposite. In archaeology, people just assume that everything's been found. But, again, you talk about ancient Egypt, you talk about the Amazon, you talk about these different places. There are entire places in the Sahara that are there are cities in those deserts, you guys, that are completely covered by sand. Like they're finding whale bones in the Sahara Desert because that used to be like lush sea,
it was very,
right. And so it's like, to presume that we know everything is silly. But again, whenever you see these archaeological digs go on, and it's usually like, oh, we never heard about this people group in this particular area. The Bible must not be real. And then we find it, and then it's like, oh shoot, yeah, these people were in this particular area. We just hadn't found evidence of it yet.
Yeah, it just doesn't get out on the mainstream media when they find that stuff.
That too. Yeah.
I think I heard an archaeologist say a stat, something like we've only unearthed or discovered, I want to say he said something like 1% to 2% of what they think might be possible to find.
Oh, well, Wes Huff, again, on Joe Rogan, he was talking about ancient Egypt. He's like, in terms of what we know of Egyptian history, we've only excavated about 1% of that.
Yeah.
And so to back up what we think we know about ancient Egypt, which we don't know jack, we're looking at 1% or less of the stuff that's actually been excavated.
I've got to watch that. I'll tell you something else that I'm kind of having to reach back, but I remember looking at some of the stuff that they thought they had unearthed from Sodom and Gomorrah, and I believe it was some sort of like glass substance, indicating high heat and so forth. So if you've ever seen, like to your point, a volcano, like what's left after a volcano it doesn't look like a bunch of glass structures. It's like very dark, harsh rock.
Yeah. Isn't that where obsidian comes from? Is that from volcanic?
I don't know.
I'm not sure about that one.
All right, you keep going. Sorry, I'll look.
But I think the point would be it doesn't appear that would be a volcano, and what they think they've found seems to correlate with what's described here.
Yeah, and the heat, they talk about the heat, the temperature had to be 6,000 plus degrees for that sand and that mix to get that kind of substance.
First of all, if you Google how do we get obsidian, everything's about Minecraft. Did I miss something in here?
Like what? Ask my son about that.
5, 6, 7, 8. The entire thing's Minecraft. What did I just stumble into here?
Rock.
Y'all keep going. I'm going to actually try to figure out how Google works while y'all are talking.
Yeah, I heard something either this week or in the last couple of weeks about the Sahara Desert. When you actually peel back the feet of sand, hundreds of feet of sand to get down, and then they start digging into there, what they find, that at one time it was a beautiful, thick vegetation of that land, and the bones and stuff that they find under there is just mind-blowing. So...
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. Kentucky. Everything's in Kentucky. All the answers.
Oh, yeah. You and I love to have conversations about the Creation Museum.
It came up last time we were here.
Have you been here? Or have you been there? You and Winkler? Y'all held hands and went through?
Right?
I haven't gone to the Ark yet, but we went to the Creation Museum and did all the exhibits there. But
so do you think there were dinosaurs on the Ark? That's what Winkler thinks.
I don't know. I wasn't there, but yeah. I believe that the dinosaurs were here at the same time as humans,
we
right?
Had dragons. So. We fought about dragons. What was it?
Genesis 1.
Genesis 1.
No, I guess it would have been Genesis 3. Is when we fought about Genesis 3.
Yeah, it was during that time. Yeah, you're like, there's dragons.
It's certainly possible, right?
Yeah. Isn't it cool looking for obsidian?
That's what I was going to say. He's
what are you looking for?
Obsidian thing.
Dude, I'm still trying to figure out what the region was. I know it was a southern
that was
region.
like 20 minutes ago. Come on.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I'm still looking at volcanic rock textures. I'm just trying to figure that out.
I just noticed you can highlight in Lagos. I need to remember this.
Hey, the highlight is the only thing that ever actually works for me every single time. Highlight, hit enter.
So God removed Lot physically from disaster, but the effects of his spiritual errors continued to plague them. Lot was conformed to the world, and all that he lived for went up in smoke and was buried under ruin somewhere in the area around the Dead Sea. So I guess just going back to be careful what you choose to live in and the people you want to hang with and the ultimate consequences.
What verse did you go through?
That was in terms of reading?
Yeah.
Went to 29. 23 to 29?
Yeah, 29. Okay.
Hey, do we know why she became a pillar of salt?
Because she looked back.
No, I know the reason she was turned into a pillar of salt, but why was she...
Why did she look back?
A pillar of
property salt?
Why salt?
Why salt? Why didn't she just poof not exist? Why didn't she turn into lime jello? Like why was she turned into a pillar of salt? Because it doesn't seem accidental. Is there any other mention of pillars of salt in Scripture? I got Logos sitting here right in front of me. Nobody read anything on that? Because I don't.
No, all I read was like the reason she looked back was more than likely she had a faithfulness in Sodom and Gomorrah and being a sodomite than being an actual believer. And so she was looking back at what she loved. And that's why she turned into a pillar of salt.
Now, this might be interesting here. The Lexham Cultural Antology Glossary talks about a salt curse. That's the practice of spreading salt over an area, often a defeated city, where they say salt the earth, right?
Yeah.
In the way of saying nothing shall grow in that area ever again. Maybe there's a connection there. So she turns around and she becomes, salt. She's part of the salt curse to an area that is to this day not inhabited, an area that was completely destroyed.
A question that was posed to me: what if Lot's wife wasn't turned into a pillar of salt? What if that was just thrown into the story to make it better?
Where'd you read that from? What?
That was a question Kyle asked us like 6 months ago.
I didn't ask you all that.
Yeah, you did. I got it in text form right now.
What was the context? What was I saying?
You can read the whole thing.
All right, I'll read the whole thing. This was on. It doesn't show what day. Hang on. Doesn't matter.
On the prep text for this.
This is from a long time ago.
All right, here we go. Honest question: if certain parts of the Bible are factually inaccurate, does that nullify the text in its entirety?
Oh, yeah.
By the way, this was just a thought experiment, guys. I'm not going to Heresy Town. All right. And then my next thing was, it's nothing. So it's not a gotcha question. I've thought about this a lot. What if Lot's wife wasn't turned into a pillar of salt? I was using that as an example. I think she was turned into a pillar of salt, but what if she wasn't turned into a pillar of salt? What if that was just thrown in the story to make it better? Does that disprove the resurrection, which is the foundation of our salvation? Lot's wife, hey, I'm trying to read here. Shut up, y'all. Lot's wife is just one of many examples of things that even if they weren't accurate, it wouldn't make me question whether or not Jesus lived, died, or resurrected. Does that make sense why I posed the question?
Yeah, it makes sense why you posed the question.
You went way back in here to find that. You gotta do. That's what he was doing the whole time. He wasn't looking for the.
He wasn't looking for the
all I had to do was go to
dirt.
search and I put in pillar of salt and it popped right up.
Oh my gosh!
I was like, thank you.
That was the point I was making. I wasn't trying to do my own version of Andy Stanley here, but I was like, let's say there was a complete problem with the transcript and she was turned into a pillar of stone and not a pillar of salt. Like, would that change anything? And I guess the reason why I thought about that, my freshman year roommate, he was in some 101 class, and I don't know if it was philosophy or whatever, but the guy was talking about how minor changes to a text or transcript can change the entire trajectory of a philosophy. And he's like, wouldn't it change the story of Jesus if he walked on water versus walked in water? So he's like, I'm changing a single letter, and it changes whether or not we think that Jesus was God, because walking in water is completely unsensational, whereas walking on water is something that no human has ever been able to do without extreme assistance, that type of thing. And so that was my thing that I was trying to think through from a thought experiment point of view, to where it's like, okay, if someone's like, because if someone could say, there's no evidence that Lot's wife even existed, much less she turned into a pillar of salt. It's like, if we're talking about the resurrection of Christ, which is the basis of our relationship, right? The new covenant, all the things, like, if that were somehow wrong in our biblical canon, does that mean that the resurrection didn't happen, right? That's where I was kind of going with it, which if scripture is God breathed, that means it has to be accurate, all the things.
And I get that, but I'm just like, all right, the chance of somebody being turned into salt and somebody resurrecting from the dead. Like, if I believe this, it's easy for me to believe this. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's where it's just like, I don't get the question. I get the walk on water question, but then you have to look at the context of they're out on a boat and it's storming out. They're afraid they're going to drown. So there's no way that Jesus is not walking on water. He's not walking in water. His head would be underwater at the point of where the boat's at. So that's where I'm like,
is there anything too hard for the Lord? That was one of the things I wrote down on all of this. So it's like, is it unbelievable? There's a lot of things that are unbelievable, but is there anything too difficult for him?
Nope.
Including our weak faith, right? Like, doesn't change the truth of the message of his saving grace, right? Like, but I think the other piece too that gives us confidence is, I think you've talked about this many times, is how many copies of the original text are there? Thousands. It's been transposed thousands of times, right?
Well, that's actually the argument of atheists, is that we have no originals. And so that's the problem with all the things that are written down is we have no originals. The problem for the atheist is that we have so many copies and so many fragments of copies that, and that again, I keep going back to Wes Huff when he appeared on Joe Rogan, because one of the things that absolutely there was a wow counter that somebody made for TikTok. It was like, how many times did Joe Rogan say wow during the interview with Wes Huff? And it was just wow. But one of the biggest ones is Joe, because you could tell that Joe Rogan just didn't really know very much about what he was talking about. He knows a little bit about a lot of different things, which could make you kind of think you're an expert, but it just, on this particular subject, he was sitting across from one. But he was talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls and what was it called? The Great Scroll of Isaiah, where it was the entirety of the book of Isaiah on a scroll or whatever. And, Joe was like, well, what did that do for Christianity? He's like, well, wait a minute, but that, that had to be different than what we have today. So how different was that scroll to what we have today? And you could just tell Wes was like, oh man, I got him. And I'm just, but I need to explain it. And so what he explained is what that did is because at that time we didn't have Old Testament transcripts that were older than the New Testament documents. Okay.
Yeah.
And so he's like, that great scroll that was found there in Qumran or whatever pushed our understanding back 1,000 years of what is written in the Old Testament, 1,000 years. And then he hit Joe Rogan with the 1-2 and he said, and it's exactly like what we have in today's Bible. It is an exact translation going back an extra 1,000 years in that particular thing. And so it's like, that's...
And the fact that it's Isaiah and that it includes Isaiah 53 specifically, huge.
Hey, you want to do something awesome, guys? Listen to this right now. Go to Google, and there's a guy that he walks through Israel, and he has Jews read Isaiah 53 because whenever they're doing their study, they're not allowed to study Isaiah 53, right? And it's just it's a very interesting thing. One thing I did want to read in Deuteronomy, so I'm just doing some more search on the salt thing, just trying to find a salt answer. But Deuteronomy 29, starting in verse 22. Deuteronomy 29:22, and the next generation, your children who rise up after you, and the foreigner who comes from a far land will say, when they see the afflictions of that land and the sicknesses with which the Lord has made it sick, the whole land burned out with brimstone and salt, nothing sown and nothing growing, where no plant can sprout, and overthrow like that of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his anger and wrath. All the nations will say, why has the Lord done this to the land, done thus to this land? What caused the heat of this great anger? And so again, the description here of brimstone, because we always hear about hellfire and brimstone, but it's also salt, which means, again, if you're going to destroy a land, like you destroy all the inhabitants, you take down all the dwellings, you burn everything, and then you salt the earth. You cannot grow anything there. You cannot build anything there. So I'm wondering, if her becoming a pillar of salt, she became a symbol of what was being destroyed in that moment. Like again, I'm providing my own conjecture here, but Ryan, go ahead.
I looked at the robot and put it into the robot.
Okay, what did ChatGPT say?
ChatGPT said, so one, a symbol of disobedience is attachment. We already kind of went over that. Salt as a preservation. Salt was a valuable commodity in biblical times. It symbolizes permanence or durability. Her becoming a pillar of salt could represent her permanent memorial as a warning against disobedience of the consequences of looking back at sin. Historical and cultural context, some believe the transformation into salt was a natural phenomenon tied to the region's geography, the Dead Sea area, near which the cities were located, is rich in salt. Some think that the sulfur and the fire raining down on the cities could have caused the minerals in the area to crystallize in a way that made Lot's wife figure appear as a salt formation, reinforcing the divine punishment narrative.
Okay, so that's kind of in line with what I was just saying.
Yeah.
What is that? That was from ChatGPT?
That was from ChatGPT.
Man, I don't even need ChatGPT. That just came from all up here, man.
Yeah. You are ChatGPT.
Dude, I am ChatGPT. Ask me questions, man. I got answers. Let's go.
You're the robot.
Let's freaking
now
go.
We can call him robot.
Oh, beep boop, beep boop. Let's keep this going, guys. All right, let's close out Genesis 19. So whoever wants to read, we're going to do 30 through 38.
Okay, I'll take that. Now Lot went out from Zorah and lived in the hills with his two daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zor. So he lived in the cave with his two daughters, and the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lay with him, that we may preserve our offspring for our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she arose. The next day the firstborn said to the younger, Behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lay with him, that we may preserve our offspring for our father. So they made their father drink wine that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him. And he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn bore a son, called his name Moab. He was the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son, and they called his name Benjamin, and he was the father of the Ammonites to this day.
So this section, yeah, I mean, I don't.
Somebody
really
got raped after this, you know.
Gracious.
It wasn't the angels, but it was Lot.
So it's in the Bible. We can so that we can assume that this happened. It's a very odd or interesting add-on after the story of God destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. Obviously, it's a very confusing passage. There doesn't seem to be a lot of, I don't know. I don't want to say there's no reason that it's here, but it's just very, very odd to me, and I didn't get it cleared up with much commentary reading.
It just shows sexual immorality and the consequences of sexual immorality, consequences of abdicating your responsibility.
100%.
Lot raised his daughters in Sodom and Gomorrah. What they did is they got him drunk. Where did they learn that? Sodom. They wanted to have kids. Where did they learn to sleep with somebody? Sodom. You know, so basically the Sodomites were ready to rape the angels. Basically what happened is Lot's daughters raped him and carried a seed. And because of that sexual immorality, there's a consequence to the line of Abraham again. So now you have the Moabites and the Ammonites who also go up against Israel and start fights, and they do not get along, and they try to conquer them. So it's just, I think what it's showing here is that Lot, like you said in past chapters, Lot slowly kept going into Sodom. And this is the consequence of surrounding yourself with these types of people. And so now he's there, and his daughters want what they want. And so they go out of what God's context is and trusting in God. Probably they don't even know God.
Yeah.
And they want what they want, and they went and got what they wanted. So
yeah,
that's how I look at it.
No, that makes sense. It's giving us a straight up example.
I've read the book several times, but it's strong fathers, strong daughters, right? And it shows the weight that we have as fathers as we raise our daughters. Same thing with, our young men, but it just goes back to here, the weight that we have as men to raise our family, to create within them that same faith. They got to see that. And so, when you read some of these stories, I read one of the commentaries that says, man, why did the Bible have something like this in there? And Barnhouse says, it's far better for our children to learn the facts of life from the word of God, where the sin is condemned, than from the dirty words on an alley wall or from lewd stories. No one can escape the knowledge of sin. There are things that were never mentioned without being accompanied by the stern warnings that God hates sin and punishes it. And so it's like, that's that responsibility we have. And they're hard conversations to have, but if we don't have them, they're going to learn it from somebody else.
Well, and why was it in the Bible? Because it happened.
It happened. And truth. It's a testament to what that lifestyle leads to. Like, if we want to go back to the nuances of Sodom and Gomorrah, like people said, you start laughing. But the thing is like, I think God's just like, the Bible is driving home that Sodom and Gomorrah was a sexually immoral place. Like, sex was not how God intended it to be between one man and one woman, and becoming one flesh and having that type of unity. Sex was just what it is in Vegas. It was cheap. It was nothing. It's like, hey, I want to have a kid. My dad's the only one around. I'm going to go do that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, I want to get my jollies off and grope something. I'm going to go knock on this guy's door, or find somebody in the town square and do what I please with them.
Don't go to the town square, man. Town square's crazy. It's crazy.
So, but that's the thing. It's like, I think what it's really showing is why this place was destroyed. Like, look at what comes out of this place. It is a sick and disgusting area, and that's why God destroyed it.
Yeah, and I just think as a parent, I think about a lot of the conversations that we have are at night, like when it's time to go to sleep. That's when all the big conversations happen. And as you read things like this, you just realize, take that time, invest in it, because it's so impactful. We've been doing this now. My son's almost 10, and the questions that he has now, because of the situations that he's facing at school dynamically with other kids and teachers and all of that, he's now got sort of a blueprint for how to handle that, and he can articulate it. But that's after many years of having these discussions. And like Lot, I don't think that he was pouring into anybody in his family, more than likely.
Absolutely.
And as a father, it comes down to you. As a husband, it comes down to you, period.
Quit abdicating your responsibility.
Yep.
I mean, if anything these chapters show us is Abraham abdicated his responsibility, Lot's abdicated his responsibility, and look what it's turned into.
Well, and also, what was Sarai supposed to be to Abram? She was supposed to be a helpmate. She was supposed to be a protector for him. And she was the one that tempted him to abdicate his leadership and to go into Hagar, have sex with Hagar, and try to like, hey, let's speed up God's promise here and let's just do it a little bit differently.
I think what she did was wrong. One, we got to understand, did she know God's promise? But two, she thought she was actually helping him. You know, and that's what we have to understand is like our wives can come to us and think that they're actually helping. And sometimes they can. And most of the time, 90% of the time they can, but 10% of the time we have to have discernment, you know? And so this is where he had to abdicate and say, no, I'm not going to sleep with Hagar, you know? And then Lot could have been like, hey, we're not going into the city walls with our daughters, you know, like, hey, I want to move back with my uncle, you know, and be under God's promise. But he chose not to do that. He probably liked the prestige that happened in Sodom where he was, you know, an elder there, and he liked, you know, he had probably had some friends there. So there's other things, you know. I think the real reason he went to Sodom in that area is one, you know, he could make more money. It was a place, it was a business transaction. And like he loved money and fame more than he loved
lust of the eyes.
Actually, it was lust of the eyes. So it was like the prodigal son. So
Absolutely. Anything else on this Genesis 19?
I think it's great. Even through this, God still shows favor and everything to Lot to a point. You know, we don't know what happens to him after this, but the fact that God brought him out of Sodom and Gomorrah, like that's a pretty good thing. So I think God counted him righteous. So I don't know if Lot's going to be there in heaven or not. I assume he is because he's counted righteous. But like to think about it, like he abdicated a lot, but God still, you know, that's still showing
his faithfulness.
Yeah,
to us,
yeah, it shows faithfulness, and it
weakness.
shows that God, like that righteousness isn't earned; it's given. It's a gift. Grace is a gift. So,
All right. That's a great place to leave it. So, guys, that is Genesis 19. Come back here next week where we are going to be talking about Genesis 20 and 21. So, Genesis 20 and 21. Make sure you're ready to go. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. We've got a Crossway starter set, or a Crossway, the Forging Table starter set. So, there's 5 books in there. There's a study journal. There's a Bible. There's a devotional. There's some great stuff in there. If you want that, go to the show notes. You can get that all at a discount. We also have the Logos Bible software. We are partnered with them. And so if you guys want to use that, you can use it as a discount. Again, go to the show notes basically for any, you know, of the Forging Table episodes over the last several months. You'll be able to find that link. And then also, we are no donation-based ministry. We are a donation-based ministry. So if you want to see Undaunted Life get to more guys around the globe so that we can equip them to be able to push back darkness, you can hop on board and be a donor. It's Undaunted.Life/donate, or you can just go to the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.